This interview is for information only and should not be considered as investment advice or a recommendation to buy shares in the company featured. Welcome to this Stock Box interview.
Joining us today is Sapan Ghai, the CCO of Sovereign Metals, following news that Sovereign plans to increase graphite pre-concentrate sample preparation at its testing facility in Malawi. Well, thank you for joining us, Sapan. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's good to be talking to you. I've seen the news this morning. It's, of course, the installation of an industrial scale spiral concentrator at the facility to prepare rutile concentrate and the graphite circuit feed. So I wonder if you can just explain this concentrator, this spiral concentrator, what it does and why it's important. And I do have, of course, the pictures that you put in the RNS as well. So it does look like a big piece of kit.
It is a big piece of kit. In fact, it's the same size and scale of what we envisaged in our pre-feasibility study that came out last year. Graphite is obviously a big part of the Sovereign investment case. It's 50% of our revenues. Even though it's a byproduct of our rutile project, we would still be the largest producer and the lowest cost producer of flake graphite concentrate in the world once up and running. Part of the commercialization of graphite as a commodity is the qualification of graphite. Now that's a bit of a black box, or a graphite box if you want, with regards to exactly what that means. But essentially it's how does the graphite in the ground work in a lithium-ion battery once it gets there, and can that supply of that type of graphite continue being supplied by the miners for the battery makers? So what this spiral does for us is, at a capacity of 10 tons of ore per hour, we're talking about producing continuous graphite concentrates, which will then be floated into a 95-96% graphite concentrate, which then goes into the essentially the anode making process, which then and then that anode ends up in the battery. So look, how does that spiral work? It's very simple. I think a lot of your viewers, listeners probably saw some of our previous work using shaking tables in our lab in Lilongwe in Malawi, which effectively just separates the rutile from the graphite. We're just separating these already liberated minerals from the ore. The concentrator is just a different mechanism of doing exactly that. Rather than shaking the ore down a table, a wet ore, we basically feed that ore at the top of these spirals. Graphite is very, very light, has a low density. Rutile is very, very heavy, has a high density. So what you find at the bottom, once the ore has traveled all the way down the spiral, is that the rutile sticks to the inner part of the spiral and the graphite to the outer part. So by having a separator at the bottom, you can separate the two out, and it's really that simple.
Right, okay. And how does the separator in itself actually work and distinguish?
Well, that's what the spiral does. So at the bottom of the spiral, you'll have essentially three outputs. You'll have the rutile heavy concentrates. You'll have what are known as the middling. So, everything else that we're not so worried about, and we will put back where it was, and we'll have the graphite. So that graphite then will be used for the battery for the battery anode part, and the rutile will be using for sending samples off to players in the titanium industry.
Right. Okay. So is it almost sort of centrifugal type processing?
That's
here?
Exactly it. I didn't want to use too much A-level physics, but essentially that's exactly the force that makes this work.
Good. Well, I wasn't allowed to do A-level physics, but I do get centrifugal forces, so that makes sense. So it's fed in at the top, it works its way down, and then through centrifugal forces, and of course the different densities of the material, you can then separate it out. So, I mean, this is undergoing final testing and it's going to be dispatched soon. So it's not on site at the moment. How is the testing processing going, and when are you hoping to have that completed and then delivered to site?
Yeah, so we actually assembled this, or our engineering consultants in Cape Town, Patterson and Cook, assembled this from scratch. So you can see the engineers in those photos, essentially just putting the final touches to the whole thing. Patterson and Cook have 30 tons of our ore on site, which we announced about a few months ago. We'll be feeding that through this concentrator, and essentially, when we're happy that it's working and it has all the right parameters, we'll get it over to site, and that'll be in a few weeks' time from now.
In a few weeks' time, okay. And can we see how this would fit into the overall plant at some point, Sapan?
Yes, we have been expanding the entire existing facility we have in Malawi, and we'll have further news on exactly what that means and how that looks and how the spiral will fit into that, as well as probably some more kit in that circuit.
Good. Yes, it'd be nice to get an idea of the flow sheet. We can maybe go through the flow sheet at some point. I think investors like to see how material flows through the plant and then ends up in the separation of what you want there. You mentioned earlier about the type of graphite, and that's the large flake, isn't it, that you ideally want for batteries? Does the spiral also separate out the different flake sizes, or is that coming afterwards, or where does that happen?
No, happens as a later stage. It's usually your kind of mid-sized flakes that end up in batteries, large and jumbo in specific uses. But that's a small part of the graphite world. Our focus is entirely on the battery side. Having said that, we're sticking to what we know as a mining company, where we don't intend to start thinking about producing anodes or batteries or anything of that like anytime soon. We'll leave that to our future customers.
To the experts, yeah. Okay. Now, as part of the RNS as well, I noticed that Dr. Garg has joined the company here, and also Mr. Marcos, bringing valuable expertise to Sovereign with the graphite commercialization strategy, and they're being used to accelerate that strategy. I wonder if you can tell us just a little bit about these two people and what they really do bring from their experience to the Sovereign team.
Sure. So, look, with Paul Marcos, he's been with us for some time now, for the past 2 or 3 years. He's our rutile mineral sands expert. Essentially, he has taken some of the well-known mineral sands projects around the world, Quale and a few others and some from Iluka Resources, the Australian mineral sands producer, from pre-feasibility, feasibility study through to construction, through to commissioning, through to operations, and actually then going ahead and implementing changes to those operations as well. So he's our mineral sands guy, he's our rutile guy. And then we have our graphite guy, who's Surinder Garg. And look, Surinder brings 25 years of metallurgist expertise to us. We have the world's largest rutile deposit. It's the second largest graphite deposit, all in one ore body. We have Rio Tinto as a 15% shareholder. It's a world-class asset. It's a tier 1 asset, and we need a tier 1 team around it. So rather than us internally trying to build out that expertise over time, it's a lot quicker and easier for us to get the right guys in the right seats in-house in Sovereign, and that's exactly what we've been doing.
Okay, good. And what's the end goal here is obviously to produce these products, both rutile and graphite. What stage is the company at in getting to that point? I mean, are you going to set a little bit of a pilot plant initially and then ramp up from there, or are you going to do the full-blown studies and then look to fund it on a high level?
Look, so the thinking is, and this has evolved from two parts. Number one, how are other mineral sands projects built? And you'll find not many get off the ground without that kind of pilot testing phase first. So
Okay.
that's clearly something that we're leaning towards and thinking about internally. And secondly, we've seen some of our peers who have rushed into construction without actually seeing whether they can continually process and produce what they're meant to produce, and we don't want to be in that category. So what it would be good for us to essentially tick the box and know that we can continually produce what we want to produce before spending lots of shareholder and off-taker and bank money on building this thing.
Indeed. And this is how the spiral separator fits into that sort of testing process, really, proof of concept almost. So, I mean, when would you look to be actually doing a run? Was it too soon to be talking about that?
Maybe a little. Look, we obviously, with any of these things, we want to make sure that we have the right equipment, we have the right in-country approvals, all that fun stuff before ever kind of embarking down any of these strategies. But it is something that we are looking into at the moment.
Okay, good. Well, thank you very much for your time. As always, Sapan Guy, the CCO of Sovereign Metals.
Thank you very much.
If you enjoyed this interview, then give us a thumbs up, a like or a retweet. Subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Twitter and hit that notification bell to be the first to know when we release new content. There's loads of great content on our website too, across all our programs at stockboxmedia.com. Thank you for watching.